Hi there everyone and welcome back. Today we'll be converting this raw file into a lovely color image, which is this one, which I'm sure is okay, but I'm going to take it a step further and transform it into a black and white fine art beauty, which is this one. So join me and try this editing technique on one of your own images. So let's start the editing process. I'll be using Adobe Camera Raw for this edit. You can use Lightroom, which is just the same, and I'll be using just a touch of Photoshop. So simple, so don't worry. The first thing I like to do is reduce the highlights all the way down to get more detail in the sky. I'm going to increase slightly the shadows, and next I'm going to increase the whites until I see clippings on the right side of the histogram, which is on the top part of the image. As you can see, we have clippings here, and I'm going to dial it down a bit more. I'm going to do the same for the blacks until we see clippings. On the left side, which is here, dial it down just a bit and we're okay. Now I'm going to increase slightly the contrast, and I'm going to reduce a bit of exposure. Don't worry about the clippings here. And from here I'm gonna use the color, which is the next tab below. I'm gonna give it that blue look by increasing the temperature slider to the left side. We're gonna give it that cool, icy look. Somewhere around there. Don't worry if you go a bit too much, it's okay, since we'll be turning it into black and white. And from here I'm going to increase just a touch of tint. Should be okay. Next I'm gonna head down to the calibration tab on the bottom. I prefer using the calibration instead of using the vibrance and saturation. I use the blue primary slider, the saturation, and push it to the right to about halfway. Next I'm going to increase give it some texture, just a bit, and a bit of clarity. Stick along with me guys, it might be quite a long editing process. And a touch of dehaze. I'm going to give it a bit of sharpening. I'm going to increase it just a bit more to around 50. I always reduce the radius all the way down and increase the details to around 80, between 80 and 90. Hold down the masking key, the Alt on your keyboard, and move the slider to the right, and the white part will be sharpened and the black part will stay how it is. And there we have our color image, and from here I'm going to turn it into black and white. And this is the part I said about using Photoshop. I'm going to open it in Photoshop. A very simple process. Don't scare away from Photoshop. We have our image opened in Photoshop. I'm gonna duplicate the background on the right side onto the plus sign to make a background copy, just in case we make any mistakes. Next, I'm gonna go down to the lower right side and I'm gonna click on this half circle black and white, and here I'm gonna click on the black and white, which will transform it into black and white. But don't worry, we're not finished yet. I'm gonna close this panel and I'm gonna go back to the half black and white circle and click on the gradient map. Here we have our gradient map opened up. If you see, you have smooth on this small window here. Click on the drop down arrow and click on classic. It will give you a much better image. And here I'm going to click on the gradient map where I want to do a slight adjustment. I want to increase the whites, which is this slider here on the right side, and I'm going to take it, move it to the left, and like this I'll be increasing the whites where I see it's okay. Press OK when you've decided your image looks okay. Close the gradient map, and now I'm going to take it back to Adobe Camera Raw, or you take it back to Lightroom. Depends which one you're using. I'm going to flatten the image. Press on these 4 lines here and flatten the image until you get your background copy again. And go up to the filter on the top left, click on filter and open it back up in Adobe Camera Raw. Here we have Adobe Camera Raw open up again. I'm going to play around with the sliders, the exposure panel here. Watch as I reduce the highlights, and you can see the amount of detail we have in the sky, which is truly amazing. I'm going to increase slightly the shadows again. I'm basically doing the same adjustments as I done on the raw file. I'm going to do the same for the whites. Hold down your Alt key on your keyboard and move it to the right side until you see clippings. Do the same for the blacks. They seem to be already clipped. If it is, don't worry, just leave it how it is. I'm going to give it a bit of contrast, just a bit, and I'm going to reduce the exposure to about there. Now here comes the best part of turning it into black and white fine art, which we'll be using masking. Follow along. It's a very simple technique. Press the masking button here, and we're going to start by using a linear gradient. We're going to place it over the sky and move it roughly down to the middle of the image. You're going to say, why not use the select sky mask? Do not use the select sky. We're creating a gradient because the select sky will give you even exposure across the top part and the middle part. Here we need to create a gradient. I'm going to reduce the exposure. I try not to go lower than -65. Now we're going to create another linear gradient, but we're going to use it again for the sky. And here we'll be going down to around half of the sky. And again, reduce your exposure. I'm going to go a bit further than 60 because we'll just be covering the top part, the very top part. Another tip, if you see that your left side is darker than the middle and your right side, just use another linear gradient, and I'll show you like this. We're trying to even the sky on both sides and the middle. Place the linear gradient around the right side corner to around there and reduce the exposure. And there we're trying to create the top part evenly. Should be okay. If you see you need more, you can just do another linear gradient, as many as you like. Now I'm going to use another linear gradient, but we're going to use it for the foreground. To around there. Always remember to reduce the exposure to around there. I try and even the top part and the bottom part the same darkness, so we draw the viewer's eye to the middle of the image, which is the main subject. This glacier, by the way, this was taken in Iceland last year, and these very small icebergs here. Next I'll be using another mask. Click on create mask, and I'll be using a radial gradient, and here we'll be placing it in the middle of the image where we have the brightest part, which seems to be here in the middle. Open it up around there and increase your exposure to make the middle part stand out. Don't worry about your clippings here. We can dial it down a bit more. To about there. And it should be okay. Next, I'll be using another mask, and I'll be using another radial gradient. And I'm going to place it on the same position where I placed the first radial gradient to around there. I'm going to move it just a bit further down, close it a bit, and this time I'm going to invert the mask to create a vignette where we'll be reducing the exposure. You can see the image is taking place. And there should be okay. Next, I'm going to use another radial gradient where I'll be placing it on the glacier here. I'm going to increase the exposure just a bit. Should be okay. And I'm going to do the same for these small icebergs here. Make sure your feathering is 100% and increase the exposure again. Not too much, around there. I'm going to use another one, a radial gradient, and place it over this other iceberg. Increase it. Now if you press this eyeball on the right side, you can see the before and after. No, sorry, I mean this eyeball up here. You can see the before and after of the masking. That was before, and this is after. You can see the big difference with just a few masks. Now I'm going to take it a step further, and I'm going to use another radial gradient, and I'm going to place it over here. On the water. To around about there. Increase the exposure. I'm going to do another radial gradient. I'm using a lot of radial gradients. I prefer the radial gradient than using a brush. I'm going to place it here, turn it around a bit, and position it where you think it's needed to increase the exposure. To around there. Now I'm going to use another radial gradient. You can say how many radial gradients are you going to use, but you'll be amazed by the results. And I'm going to place it on these pebbles or rocks, whatever you can want to call them. I don't want to go down to the corner. Turn it a bit more and increase the exposure. We're doing this, it's just like dodging and burning. Instead of using the brush for dodging and burning, we're using radial mask, which is the same thing. I'm going to use another radial gradient. I'm going to place it on this brighter part of the mountain here, or hill, whatever it is. Turn it around. Open it up and increase the exposure. Open it up a bit more. And there we have it. Now I'm going to do one last thing. Let's get out of the masking. And I'm going to take it back over to Photoshop. Just for the last bit. Press OK. You can see the before and the after if you were quick. And I'm going to go back down to this half circle of black and white, and I'm going to use the curves. The curves is a powerful tool. Go on the default, the drop down window, and press linear contrast. It's going to make the image pop just a bit more, but I would just be using the highlights. I pressed on the blacks. This is the area of the blacks. I clicked on here, and I'm going to raise it to where it was before by pressing the up arrow. Next I'm going to click on the dot here where it's for the whites or highlights, and I'm going to raise it a bit. To about there. Close it. Press on the eyeball here to see the before and after. Before and after. Well, I think that should be enough for you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a lot from this. I'll be showing you the final edited image at the end of the video. Please leave any comments below, and make sure to hit that subscribe button and the thumbs up. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in another video.